So today I thought I'd talk about a documentary series that I enjoyed uh, many years ago. And it sounds like something boring when you mention the word documentary series, like I'm going to talk about vegetables or something, but this is not that. There is a filmmaker who I consider sort of genuinely exceptional, by the name of Adam Curtis, and I've ended up watching everything by him, because I find these films, these documentaries that he makes to be sort of very compelling, and uh, I like how they are sort of all over the place because they connect history, politics, psychology, and eventually sort of modern life in a way that I don't see anyone else doing. And the one that I thought I'd mention today is the Century of the Self, which I think might be the best place to start with him. Yeah, I think it might be his best film, um, because it also engages you in a certain way, and it rewards a second viewing or a third viewing, because it's really packed with these sort of ideas and characters and connections that um, you might not fully appreciate the first time around. Um, so yeah, I mean, so what is this about? Uh, it's in a way it's about how these ideas from Freud and psychology, about 100 years ago now, eventually spread and shaped our world today. And he focuses on advertising, public relations, consumer culture, and eventually what's downstream of all that, which is politics. And that description doesn't sound very thrilling, but the sort of the thing about this documentary is that it sort of keeps opening these sort of doors, and things click for you because it starts in one place, and then very quickly you realize it's not actually just a recounting these things. It's not just about Freud or therapy or something. It's it's trying to talk about the world we live in now. Um, well, okay, it was made quite some time ago, so maybe the world we lived in 20 something years ago, but still the world we live in now, which and with this language that is used, this language of self-expression and feelings and identity, which you take for granted, but that's sort of the point, which is it had it tries to reveal this hidden backstory of what you might consider ordinary modern life. It makes these strange connections that feel plausible when you hear them. It introduces some of these figures that you may never have heard of, but who it turns out played these surprising roles in just creating the kind of world that you live in. Um, so yeah, and it begins with, as I said, this sort of unsettling but basic idea of Freud, which is that human beings are way less rational than we like to think, and so we don't make decisions in sort of a calm, reasonable, or conscious way, and we are way more messy than that, and in fact there are these impulses and desires and irrational drives, and we don't fully understand these irrational drives, and we don't fully control these irrational drives, and yet um, and yet sort of we are sort of driven by that, and everything is driven by that. And this is like a strong starting point, because once you begin there, a lot of modern life begins to look very different, because naturally, if people are not rational, then, well, how do you persuade them? How do you sell to them? How do you govern them? And how do you, and more importantly, how do you then shape public life? Um, and this is sort of the question to hold in the back of your mind as you watch this. And one of these characters that the documentary introduces is Edward Bernays, who I had never heard of, and it's quite likely that you would never ever have heard of him either. But it turns out he had a very, very crucial role in determining how the, these foundations of the world are shaped, because he, it turns out, was Freud's nephew, and he is sort of a perfect hinge figure, um, in especially for this documentary, because he takes these ideas about, received from Freud, which again, you take a lot of this stuff for granted, but remember, this was all, there was a time when it was novel, and he was picking it up before it was mainstream. And so anyway, he takes these ideas about this hidden irrational self, and sort of applies them, and takes it very seriously and applies them, in the sort of world of persuasion, which is advertising. And that's part of the pleasure of this documentary, because you get to see how this, how a lot of structure of the way that consumer culture is came about, through these, how it evolved, and almost how it had to evolve. Because yes, if people are moved by hidden desires, then you don't have to appeal to them through reason, but instead you do that through, essentially a fantasy world, because you mention, you appeal to their sort of insecurities, or sense of status, or what they are, or lack, and in general sort of catering to their self-image, and eventually, you're not selling and they're not buying because there's an actual need, but because of, the thing becomes a symbol, um, and how it helps them feel, and the sense of being sort of modern and liberated, or whatever, distinctive, etc., all comes from there. um, and so, yeah, like I may have said, it's it tries to show in this bit of a winding way, but it tries to show the origins of all of consumer culture, and how all of this language of aspiration and lifestyle and self-expression is something that had an origin. Basically, it was sort of shaped and cultivated, and it's being shaped and cultivated. And so this is one of the enjoyable things about this documentary, and others like it. So there's a whole sort of series, um, of films that he has made, and they all sort of have this thing where it takes what is normal or familiar and makes them, and you have to look at it at a remove in some bit of a unfamiliar way, so that you can see um, how it emerges, etc. And seeing how branding matters, or and basically how and why products are tied to identity, um, and how that began to be true, because there 100 years ago it was not true that products were tied to identity in the same way. So yeah, and then the same ideas are taken further and further in different spheres. So it doesn't stop with shopping. It goes from advertising on to politics, because the suggestion is that the tools are the same. Where well, if you have developed a framework and an industry about understanding consumers, then you basically apply the same thing to understanding voters, and you have this attention to their their desire and again the insecurities and their sense of self-image, um, and it's consequential in, and again this is why it goes in all these places, because in a philosophical sense, it's like, okay, what is the point? Well, is the point about forming citizens? Is the point about having a shared vision? Maybe. But here's this other approach, and they clearly took, it's natural to see how that other approach was taken, which is, okay, no, instead it's all about managing preferences and testing reactions, and treating these uh, people as bundles of wants, or fears, etc., because you've gotten used to doing that for people as consumers. So it naturally shifts over to the case of people as voters or any other sphere. So yeah, after watching this, you may or may not agree with sort of this, the way it conveys the sense of this being the underlying sort of whole truth or not. But it's great to see it laid out that way, because it's not some sort of history lesson about psychoanalysis or advertising history, although you certainly can get that from it, but rather it's this lens on the world, and it shows you how to and uh, once you sort of see this and get it, then this whole you will see the underpinnings of this everywhere, and this whole atmosphere of authenticity and quote unquote being yourself. uh, you'll see how all of that also comes from this, and it's it traces the passage of this over time until you get to where we are now, where you're basically just drenched in this, and it's all perfectly normal, and you don't think of it as ever having had an origin. um, so anyway, yeah. So he does have a bit of a overly sweeping or dramatic take sometimes on things, but that's kind of his style. He's trying to make sort of large patterns out of messy reality, but that's what sort of makes it memorable. And you have the strong lens, you have these surprising connections, and it's I think it's definitely worth your time. So yeah, I wanted to mention this today. I get these, I guess, ideas about things to talk about that I've sort of liked or come across, and that's what I wanted to do today, and that's what I'll do again later. Alrighty.